Shortly, we will read Parashat Tazria from the Torah. The Torah will be lifted and dressed and held while Liz chants the Haftarah from the book of Melachim Bet. Then the Aron HaKodesh will be opened once again, the Torah held, and we will face the ark and recite 3 prayers. A prayer for the safe return of the hostages, the traditional prayer for the state of Israel, and a prayer for the Palestinians in Gaza. For me, the moment is profoundly intense. 6 months have passed since October 7th. 133 hostages remain in Gaza. As the days pass, the hope that many will return home alive keeps diminishing. I think of the rallies I have been to in Israel and here in New York pleading for the hostages' return. And I always make a little addition to my prayer for Hirsch Goldberg Polin. His father, John Polin, and I studied at Hebrew University together during our junior year abroad in college. Though we have not remained in touch, I could identify his voice anywhere. Knowing him makes it feel more real and more proximate. One of my peers has a child that has been kidnapped and is held in Gaza. It's unimaginable, yet it is real. So we say the prayer for the hostages to return home safe. It hadn't been our practice at BJ to recite the prayer for the state of Israel every Shabbat until October 7th. Given the enormity of what had happened and the ongoing war, it felt important that the prayer be included. The state and our people experienced a barbaric massacre, and it needed our prayers then as it needs our prayers now. For the last 6 weeks or so, we have added a prayer that Rolly and I wrote for the people of Gaza. For a while, Rolly, Becca, and I had been adding a sentence or two spontaneously, to recognize the enormity of the suffering and death of the Palestinians. But at some point, that small addition didn't feel like enough. A prayer was needed for the people of Gaza. And so now we recite that too. We have received no emails or comments about the prayer for the hostages. There is a collective feeling that they need our prayers. It is not controversial or upsetting or triggering. That is not actually the case for the other 2 prayers. They raise eyebrows in different ways for different people. Take a deep breath if you're feeling nervous. People ask, why aren't we reciting the alternative prayer for the state of Israel that is in Sidor Lev Shalem on the side of page 178, which is what we have typically read when we read a prayer for the state of Israel on Yamim Na'arim or things like that. It focuses more on the ideals of Israel and has some significant distinctions from the traditional prayer. By the way, the traditional prayer was written in 1975 by Rabbis Herzog and Uziel. There's some interesting stories about it, actually. The answer to that question is that the alternative prayer speaks less to this particular moment, it feels, with regard to Israel's safety and security. And it felt less connected to the present reality on the ground. And also, many people grew up saying the prayer for the state of Israel, so it feels almost rhythmic, and it feels part of a collective that felt like it was important to be a part of at this particular time. However, the traditional prayer brings up its own discomfort. First, with the phrase, Reshit Tzmichat Geulatenu, the beginning of the flowering of our redemption. If Israel is considered to be the beginning of our redemption, it is cast as one step in the divine plan, and therefore it is endowed with divine purpose, which is actually very dangerous. In the early 80s, the chief rabbi of England, Rabbi Emanuel Jacobowitz, added the word beginning before Reshit, Shetehei, so that it may be, turning the phrase, the beginning of redemption, into a prayer for hope rather than a statement of fact, which is, you'll see in our Siddur, the Shetehei is actually in parentheses. We choose to say it. The second concern around the traditional prayer is the phrase, Ve'ateret nitzachon te'atrem, crown their efforts with glory, or with victory. And for some, this phrase feels triumphalist. It expresses the desire to win, it seemingly at all costs. And with the progression of the current war, for some, the phrase feels all the more grotesque, given the enormous loss of life in Gaza and the questions about the morality of the Israeli army. We have also heard from a number of people that it is difficult for them to hear the new prayer that we have composed for Gaza. And the primary concerns revolve around two issues. Initially, we used the figure of over 30,000 when we cited the number of Palestinians killed. The number has been met with skepticism because it was first reported by the health ministry in Gaza, which is of course run by Hamas. And so people said those numbers couldn't be true. There is evidence to say that they are true. There's an article in Time magazine, although there have been other disputed. I'm not so interested in the exact number, but I understand where the skepticism comes from. And the second is that some express discomfort in the length of the prayer. It was too long, and therefore disproportionate to the other prayers. Life as a rabbi is pretty interesting sometimes. As the weeks and months have passed since October 7th, and as these concerns surfaced, I have started thinking a lot about what is in the critiques and what is under the surface. What is it that really bothers us when we hear these prayers? And so Rolly and I actually made some changes over time, I think that people have noticed. Because we wanted to create the possibility for more people to pray the prayer and to move past the resistance, which may not have been, by the way, my normal orientation, but it became clear that our agenda was actually that we pray for the people of Gaza. And if we have blocks to that, it actually limits our ability to pray. So it felt more important to change the prayer to accommodate some of the critiques than actually to keep it as is, whether we agreed or disagreed with the critique. I know for those that have raised these questions and concerns, some elements of the prayers feel like a breach in the midst of the prayer service, as if being suddenly jolted from the sanctuary and comfort of prayer and community to feeling like an outsider, separate and alone. And this distance is actually at the essence of this week's Parashat Tazria and next week's Parashat Matzorah. They are often read together, but this year, due to the leap year, they are read apart. The Torah dedicates two parshiot to speaking of bodily states, bodily emissions, childbirth, and various skin ailments that make one ritually impure, tameh, and put people outside the camp where they have to remain separate from the community for a period of time until they're allowed to return. Dr. Rachel Adler writes in her essay, "Those Who Turn Away Faces," societies dread invasion, disintegration and inundation. Hence, the extremities and borders of our nation and our bodies are loci of concern, places where integrity might be breached and order overthrown. Human skin is a long, continuous boundary that demarcates the most basic of borders, the border between the human body and the world outside it. Breaches in the skin, such as those of tzara'at, it's often translated as leprosy, although it's not an accurate term. I'm just going to call it tzara'at, which is this skin, white scaly skin thing, are attacks on the body's wholeness. They leave the raw flesh vulnerable to the external world. No one likes the feeling of disruption, of not being in alignment when order is upended and when our boundaries have been breached, or we feel invaded by foreign ideas or substances. We don't like it when our own narrative is called into question. It makes us feel unsafe. Professor Wendy Zieler notes that the Hebrew word for skin, which is or, with an ayin, not with an aleph. Aleph, or is light, but with an ayin is skin, ayin vav resh, which appears actually around 40 times in chapter 13 of Parashat Tazria. Speaking of the Metzora, the person afflicted with tzarat, that it recalls the verb le'orer, to arouse, which is spelled lamed ayin vav resh resh. So it's not the same, but it's the same sound. Le'orer and or, you can hear it. And lehitorer, to wake up, to wake oneself up. And laha'ir, to comment, presumably in response to something said by someone else. She says, our skin, through its interface with others, is a site of continual awakening and interaction. I'm going to say that again. She's playing with the word or of skin to say that the skin is the place that we experience some kind of awakening because of its interaction with everything else. Our skin, through its interface with others, is a site of continual awakening and interaction. This sense of awakening is actually expressed powerfully in Talmud Nida in explaining what happens to the Metzora who has been rendered tameh by the priest. This is what it says in the Talmud. His clothes shall be ripped, and the hair of his head shall grow long, which are like mourning, right? These are like mourning practices. And he will put a covering on his lip and will cry, tameh, tameh, impure, impure, which comes from chapter 13. The Metzora publishes the fact that he is ritually impure, as he must announce his pain to the masses. And then the masses will pray for mercy on his behalf. In Talmud Chulin 78a, there is an additional element. The same piece is told, and then it continues and says, and likewise, one to whom any unfortunate matter happens must denounce it to the masses, and then the masses will pray for mercy on their behalf. We always think of the Metzora, the person who's been afflicted, as being away, but I think this story actually speaks to the fact that the brokenness of the Metzora, of the one who has been identified as tameh, tameh, impure, impure, screams it out, has to scream it out, which bridges the gap between the one who is supposed to be outside the camp and those who are in the camp. Because those who are in the camp have to listen to the fact that the person is saying, I'm impure, which awakens in them the desire to pray for that person on their behalf. It's chilling, actually, that the Talmud imagines anyone who was something so unfortunate to be like the Metzora. It's chilling, I think, that the Talmud imagines anyone with something unfortunate happening to them to be like a Metzora. that chulin actually extends the experience of the mitzora, the person who has tzara'at and who is impure, to anyone who has something unfortunate happening to them. It's as if that state of being outside and isolated and alone is then projected on all people who are going through hard things. And that crying out of that person is what wakes everyone up to pray for that person. Rachel Goldberg, the mother of Hirsch Goldberg Poland, said at the rally on Sunday, "First thing in the morning, I always say to myself, and now pretend to be human. And I get out of bed and I put this costume of being a person." Her pain is so profound that she has to actually put on like an additional layer to function in the world, to move about in the world without feeling so raw and so vulnerable. Thankfully, most of us don't have to live in Rachel and John's skin. But right now, I think we all feel more vulnerable. Our skin is thinner. We are more easily triggered and invaded. And in many ways, rightly so. We are more on the defense as Jews in this country and in the world at large. So we shore up our costumes and add covering so that our stories and our sureties are not penetrated or breached. So we push away feeling that feeling. And there's so much detail describing the Mitzorah and the various states of Tahor and Tameh, of pure and impurity, in this week's reading and next week's. Perhaps its relevance today, and this is what I've been thinking about a lot, is more about emphasizing the power of tzara'at, having vulnerable skin, as a state of potential awakening. There is a famous story in the Talmud in Sanhedrin. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says to Eliyahu, "When will Mashiach come? When will the Messiah come?" And Eliyahu said to him, "Go ask him." Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi asked, "And where is he sitting?" And Eliyahu said to him, "At the entrance of the city of Rome." Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi asked him, "And what is his identifying sign by means of which I can recognize him? How will I know it's the Messiah?" And Eliyahu answered, "He sits among the poor who suffer from illnesses, and all of them untie their bandages and tie them all at once. But the Mashiach unties one bandage and ties one at a time." He says, the Mashiach, "Perhaps I will needed to be served to bring about the redemption. Therefore, I will never tie more than one bandage, so that I will not be delayed." We will continue to say the prayer for the hostages, for the state of Israel, which includes soldiers and all the inhabitants, no matter what race or religion or ethnicity, and for the people of Gaza who are enduring imaginable pain. There is so much screaming in our world and in Israel. We don't have to give up anything to respond to people's cries. We don't have to choose one prayer over another, one people over another. There is enough pain to go around, and we can pray on everyone's behalf who is screaming. For me, prayer is the vehicle to both shore up my faith, give me a place to put my sorrow, and to call on God and community for support. It is also the place where I wrestle with what I believe, with what is in the Siddur and what is in life. As we say in the Chadodi, Hitorari, Hitorari, wake up, wake up. Prayer is a place to wake up. There are so many people with wounds that need to be bandaged. The Mashiach will only come when we're willing to listen to every story and wrap each other's wounds and say a prayer for each other. Shabbat Shalom.